Welcome to the Back in Time podcast with Kyle and JD, where every week we jump into our DeLorean, cruise to 88 miles per hour, and travel back in time to review our favorite films. This week, in episode 3, we travel back to August 14th, 1987, almost 30 years to today, and review the cult classic, The Monster Squad, directed by Fred Dekker. Before we start the podcast, I want to remind you to find us on iTunes and subscribe to our page. It's super easy, and every time we post a new episode every Friday, it will automatically download to your device. Also, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. That helps us grow the podcast and eventually pick up sponsors to help keep this podcast going. Now, on to the show. We're the Monster Squad. So let's go ahead and kick it off. So welcome to the Back in Time podcast. I am Kyle, joined by my co-host, JD. JD, how you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good. Excited to discuss the Monster Squad. Very excited to hear what you have to say after 30 years of this sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into it as well. Quick thoughts on last week's episode. We covered Batman. We have 12 subscribers now on iTunes, and it is available for to subscribe and find us on iTunes now. All of our episodes are on there. But your general thoughts on the episode?
Definitely a little bit longer than I probably anticipated, but I think that's just sort of the movie that Batman was, that there's just a lot to say.
Yeah, that was with trimming it down a little bit too. Yeah, it's probably about 2 hours and 40 minutes when we recorded it. But yeah, I thought it went well. Let's just dive into, just like what's going on in the box office and some new trailers, and just dive into things here.
Yeah, so I did finally see Spider-Man Homecoming.
Oh, nice. What'd you think?
It was pretty enjoyable, pretty entertaining. Almost exactly what I thought it would be, but fun in a lot of ways. So I'm really hoping that they do more with the Spider-Man movies. Looking forward to them expanding him into the MCU, and hopefully that'll refreshen what's something that's becoming pretty stale, which is those repetitive Marvel movies.
What did you think of Tom Holland's Peter Parker compared to those in the past year?
I think that Peter Parker and Spider-Man have the same sort of problem that Bruce Wayne and Batman have, in terms of acting, is they're two different characters in a lot of ways. Whereas Peter Parker is really nerdy, and Spider-Man's really cocky. Mm-hmm. And so I think Tom Holland did a great job of playing the nerd. He's fumbling. He's not really confident what he's doing. And I thought he did decent as Spider-Man. But for me, I still loved Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I thought that was like such a good level of sarcastic, snarky, arrogant. But then he takes off the mask, and Andrew Garfield's a pretty good-looking dude. And you're just like, oh, that's not really a good Peter Parker.
Yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying. But yeah, no, I thought Spider-Man Homecoming was really good. And of course, I love Michael Keaton in that. And his career resurgence has been pretty cool to watch. So again, for a guy that didn't want to be typecasted, he's pretty much looking like a bat.
And succeeding.
Yes, absolutely. What else do we got?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything else that's going on in the cinema. It's been pretty slow.
I did go see 38 meters down, or 40. I can't remember the actual distance down, but it's that shark movie. Yeah, that was okay.
You did see that?
Yeah, I did see it.
And it was just okay. That's your one word. You talk about Batman for 3 hours, but you could talk about this movie in one word. It's okay.
You're right. Yeah, it's a B movie. It's a red box. Red box at best, as we say.
Red box at best.
Yep. Luckily, I have like a $1 theater around here, so I didn't spend much to watch it.
Oh yeah, that's the way to go. That's how I saw Baby Driver. It cost me $3.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that one to go in my $1 theater. I'll be going to watch Baby Driver for sure. I've heard really good things about that one.
It's good, but I wouldn't do more than $1 theater for it. It's enjoyable. The acting is pretty good. The music is great. It's fun.
But that's what I hear. Soundtrack is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. What about trailers? Which ones did you see? What do we got?
What was the name of the one? The Last Flags?
Last Flag Flying. That one, I think it just came out today, actually.
So I caught the trailer for Last Flag Flying. I think I'm saying that right
Yep.
again. I knew nothing about it before I saw the trailer hit. Wow, what a cast. We got Hal from Malcolm in the Middle, and he's in the trailer is freaking phenomenal. Like, he stole the show for me.
By the way, his name in this movie is Sal. So he's gone
Is
from
it
Hal
really?
to Sal.
I did not pick that up.
Yeah. Of course, Bryan Cranston,
obviously,
probably best known for Breaking Bad at this point, but also Malcolm in the Middle is solid, for sure.
Yeah, and it's so weird because in Malcolm in the Middle, he was such an okay actor, you know?
Right.
Like, not that he was bad or anything, but then when he came out in Breaking Bad, you realize, like, holy moly, this guy can actually act.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Yeah, so the trailer looked good. Richard Linklater's got a series of amazing films that he's done. Steve Carell was in Little Miss Sunshine, which was also about transporting a body to an extent. So he's got a good repertoire of dealing with death, and it's so funny to see him outside of Michael Scott. And then, of course, Morpheus is just typical, Morpheus. That was Morpheus, right?
Yeah, it's Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah.
Okay.
You're on.
Yeah, I screwed up for half the movie of Monster Squad. I thought the detective, and this is necessary, the colored detective. I thought it was Miles Dyson from Terminator 2 for the longest time.
Yeah, I could see the mix up there.
And I was like, oh, that's not him.
No. He was in something, I can't remember. We'll pull up his IMDb when we go through casting, but he was in something else that I saw that he was pretty good in. But I feel like he's always plays a cop. But that's 1980s typecasting for you.
That'll happen.
Coming out this week, there's still not a lot, man. The box office is down right now. They've got the new Samuel L. Jackson, which I love your impersonation, Samuel. You got anything for me?
You can't put me on the spot. I think you put me on the spot with him last time, too, and I couldn't pull it off. It has to be spontaneous. Spontaneous L. Jackson.
Please, damn it! Jurassic Park. Ryan Reynolds is in that one. The Hitman's Bodyguard. I'm sure that'll do okay. The Monster Project comes out. Since we're talking about the Monster Squad, we've got the Monster Project. Have you seen the trailer? That actually looks pretty cool.
I gotta say, I have not. I scrolled past it and saw the Monster Project, got confused. Was it Monsters Inc.? Was it Monsters Ball? Was it Project X? I didn't know what it was, so I didn't watch it.
But yeah, that's pretty much it for box office and movie trailers. Again, there's not a whole lot to get into yet. So let's kind of get into the intro Monster Squad. So what's your first memory of watching Monster Squad? Obviously, this came out when we were 2 years old.
I remember had to have been 5 years old. Well, when did the second Link game come out?
I'm not sure.
Maybe 91?
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark.
I remember going to the video store and renting that video game for Nintendo, and then getting the Monster Squad on VHS, and then going back and watching it with my older brother, my mom, and our next door neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And loving it, and instantly thinking that we had a creepy haunted house on our street, thinking that only us kids could save the world, that the adults were so inept that there's just nothing that they could do to help us. And I think that's when I started to grow a healthy paranoia of everyone and everything.
Yeah, so for me, my dad had this recorded on a VHS tape, one of like 3 movies that he had back-to-back recorded. I just remember watching this thing so many times and renting it from Blockbuster so many times that eventually my dad just ended up buying the VHS from Blockbuster because the other one was so worn out. And it's one of my favorite movies, and I'm excited to get into the actual review and talk more in details. But I mean, I know you recently you bought the 20th anniversary DVD, right?
Yeah, I can't believe that was the 20th. sadly to say, I have another version of it too, but I bought the 20th anniversary edition and opened it for the first time last night.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cool special features in there, and we'll talk about that one more in the box office numbers. But one of the things that I guess I want to discuss is like, why do you think this movie didn't do as well at the box office?
What did it do at the box office, first of all?
Okay, so let's get in. We can skip into that. So this opened August 14th of 1987. It spent only 10 days in theater. Opening weekend, $1.9 million. And total domestic gross, $3,769,990.
Against what budget?
$15 million.
Gosh, they took that on the chin.
Yeah. So it only spends 10 days and they gave up on it pretty quick. Now, the weekend of August 14th, it ranked number 12 at the box office, behind a bunch of movies I've never heard of. Stakeout was number 1. The Living Daylights, which is a James Bond movie. Can't Buy Me Love. No Way Out. La Bamba. Masters of the Universe. Disorderlies. RoboCop. The Lost Boys. Summer School. Back to Beach. And then at number 12, Monster Squad.
Jeez.
So, 5 or 6 of those movies I don't think I've ever watched or even heard of.
No, but then there's some big names on that list.
Yeah, RoboCop and Lost Boys were in I want to say their 3rd, 4th, or 5th week at the box office. That's why they're down the list a little bit. But I'd love to know how a movie called Summer School made $27 million and Monster Squad couldn't break 4.
It's got to be star power.
That could be it, yeah. Did you watch the trailer on the special features?
I've seen it before. I didn't watch it last night, though. I know you gave me a special heads up to watch it, so I apologize for not. I can pop it on right now.
No, it's good. We don't have to watch it right this second, but I don't know. I think it's a typical 80s trailer, but they focused a lot on, I think, the comedy in the kids. And if they would have focused more, I think, on the monsters, this may have played a lot better opening weekend.
And especially at the time, 1987, monsters were, look at the Lost Boys. I mean, vampires were pretty monster-rific.
Yeah.
And it was in the right wheelhouse. And it definitely hit on that, the universal monster craze, which is even coming back now. With what Tom Cruise did with that horrific movie, The Mummy. It's the same sort of a thing where, depending on how you focus the action versus the comedy versus the kid power of the late and 80s and not focusing on the monsters, I think I agree with you that could have been harmful.
Yeah. Yeah, so, a couple things just on the actual movie, and I'll come back to the DVD release from 2007 in a minute. I've got a couple cool things I'm excited to share with you. But so the Monster Squad's 1987. It's a horror comedy written by Shane Black and Fred Decker. It's directed by Decker, who also wrote and directed Night of the Creeps. Have you ever seen that one?
Night of the Creeps has one of the most intense intro scenes in a movie ever. And have you seen it?
It's been a long, long time. I actually think we should add that to the list at some point.
We can add it to the list if only to watch that intro scene. Anybody, you don't have to watch the whole movie. Just watch the beginning and enjoy the hell out of that.
So watching the special features, one of the things that's interesting, in Night of the Creeps, when they're in the bathroom, they pan to the tile wall, and it's written there, it says The Monster Squad, because they were already in pre-production.
That's exciting. I never knew that.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So this is released by TriStar Pictures on August 14th of 1987. It filmed toward the end of 86. Special effects artist Stan Winston worked on this, who is amazing, has a great background. The film was not a success on its initial release, but subsequently developed a cult following. It's a 53% on Rotten Tomatoes, and an average of 5.4 out of 10 The Los Angeles Times wrote, "It's fun for the kid in all of us." And the New York Times called it a feature-length commercial for a joke store that sells not great rubber Monster Max. Jeez, if I can say that. So, one good review by Los Angeles and a pretty bad review by New York. It was released on VHS by Vestron Video in 1988, which actually is the only VHS they ever released. So thank God they at least put that in the stores. So a 20th anniversary reunion of the Monster Squad was held with cast members and Fred Dekker in attendance in April of 2006 at the Austin, Texas Alamo Draft House. It was put together by Ain't It Cool News, who were longtime fans of the film. Most of the cast, when you listen to the special features, had absolutely no idea that this had any type of cult following. And for 20 years, basically thought it was a massive disaster.
That's too bad.
Kind of similar to like Wizard of Oz, where the guy that directed that actually died before that movie actually ever made a cent. Now, on to my cool stats here. So it gets released in 2007 by Lionsgate, who owned the rights to the movie at that point. DVD sales, they made over $10 million off the 20th anniversary DVD. So when you add that to the total, the final gross is actually $14 million. So they actually make back most of their money.
That's got to be really nice to 20 years later make $10 million off something that they probably threw away.
Yeah. Now here's what I was going to call you about a couple days ago. So I'm trying to do research. I couldn't find any VHS numbers, or I couldn't find much on the DVD side. I finally found something today. So I reached out to the director, Fred Dekker, on Facebook, who responded to me.
Oh,
and I will
badass.
read the response. So I asked him if he had any idea of just like how it did with DVD sales or VHS. He writes back, "Hi, Kyle. Sorry, not a clue about the stats. I do know that VHS rental copies saw a lot of action, and some fans admitted to losing them and then paying back the video stores only to have the copies mysteriously show up at their home collection. I can tell you the Lionsgate DVD Blu-ray was the best-selling classic title at the time, a fact which probably spurred Sony's interest in doing the Night of the Creeps disc, which came a couple years later. Good luck with the podcast, Fred Dekker."
I bet you, you've been excited. You've been sitting on that response for a while now, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, so how cool is that to get a response from the director and just give us a little shout out to Fred Dekker here.
Yeah, dude, that is clutch thinking by you. Freddie boy, thanks for reaching out, giving us a little bit of insight. Maybe next time when we review RoboCop 3, I believe was him.
Yes.
We can reach out to him again and maybe get a little bit more insight from him on what I would say is one of the best of the RoboCop movies. It's in the top 4 at least.
Yeah, I don't think we should call him Freddie Boy though, huh?
I'm sorry, Fred.
No,
I have the utmost respect for you and your career.
So let's get into some casting here, and then we'll jump into the movie review. So the casting, I mean, these guys are relatively unknowns. A lot of them did not have a massive career afterwards. Now, the director, Fred Dekker, he did this one and then followed that up with RoboCop, which essentially ended his career as a director, since both of those movies tanked back to back. Unfortunately for him, he's now back to writing, and he's teamed with his co-writer on the Monster Squad, Shane Black. So have you ever looked at Shane Black's resume?
Yeah, Shane Black has got some good credits to him. He's especially lately become a little bit of a resurgence, and to the point where I was surprised when I realized that he was the one that wrote the Monster Squad, because I was like, oh, I know who Shane Black is. Yeah.
So they're actually teaming up together. They co-wrote the new Predator reboot that's going to come out in 2018. So Fred Dekker's part of that, and he recently did The Nice Guys. I don't know if you saw that one with Russell Crowe. That's a pretty good buddy cop comedy movie with Ryan Gosling. That's a good one too.
Crickets.
Nothing on there, huh? Now, let's talk about the cast a little bit. So we've got Sean, who's played by Andre Gower. So any thoughts on the Sean character, who's pretty much the leader of the Monster Squad?
I think this is going to be a difficult one for us to really, have fun talking about the cast, minus, I think, probably two of the bigger names.
Yeah.
Obviously. But, as an actor, he was pretty decent. Watching him as an adult, a little corny, a little hammy, but, props to him for being so young and pulling off a decent role.
Yeah, I thought he's really good. He's worth mentioning. You've got Rudy, who's played by Ryan Lambert, who's really no longer active. He's done a couple things since 1987. Ashley Bank, who plays Phoebe, the Phoebe. She's actually started to do some things now that she's gotten into adulthood, but after the 87, I think she did a couple TV movies and then took a break for 20 years. So now let's talk about the monsters, because a couple of those guys are pretty seasoned actors. Let's discuss Tom Noonan, who plays Frankenstein.
And he plays him so well too. It's such a good Frankenstein because he's creepy and he's scary and also very reserved and well spoken.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think he's a fantastic Frankenstein. Can you remember the movie that he did? I know it's going to be on our list at some point. It's a 90s movie, and he plays another villain in that one.
Are you referring to, of course, Last Action Hero?
Absolutely.
Okay, I mildly cheated. I have it popped up on my phone.
Oh, you son of a gun. So, no, that's definitely got to be on our list. I love Last Action Hero. We've got Duncan Regehr playing Count Dracula. I actually think this might be my favorite Dracula of all time. It looks like he stopped acting in 2009, but he had a pretty long list of credits up until then. So any thoughts on his portrayal of Dracula?
As a kid, he definitely scared the shit out of me as Dracula. But as an adult, man, this guy brought it. He brought his A game for Dracula. Mm-hmm. He's just so well thought out and methodical and evil. Man, and he goes and he blows up their treehouse and he just sort of laughs about it. He's an amazing Dracula. Yep, absolutely. And then we've got the mom and the dad, and then we'll wrap up the casting. Everybody else we can talk about. Stephen Macht, he plays Dell, Mr. Crenshaw. He's done quite a few things, nothing out of this world as far as acting goes, but what did you think of him as the cop and the dad? He's pretty classic 80s, strung out dad cop. He's trying to do the right thing. Yep. He just always seems tired. He just always seems like he needs a cigarette and a cup of coffee. He nails it. And
then we've got the mom, Mary Ellen Trainor. So she is just like your Hollywood mom. I feel like every role she played, she was a mother. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2015 from cancer, but she's probably best known to me as the mom. She's Mrs. Walsh from Goonies.
She is, isn't she?
Yes.
I feel like she was probably a little underutilized in this movie.
Yeah, I would agree.
I try to think back to any lines that she really had outside of her and her husband having a failing marriage, which I never picked up on as a kid. As an adult, it's just sort of really sad to watch the dad sort of just wipe his marriage under the rug, and she's trying to get them to go to marriage counseling, and he has to go to work. Yeah, she's just left in her apron, just sort of like, oh, not again.
Right. And we'll definitely cover that in the review because that's some of my talking points to get into. But now, if you're listening, follow us on social media. You can tweet us at Back in Time Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Tell us what you want us to review next. We've got a couple things lined up, but we're going to start putting together some poll topics once we get a big enough following here. You guys can pick what we cover. So I want to get into the review here. So kind of jumping into this opening scene, we've got the TriStar White Horse, which I always loved for some reason as a kid, kind of like the MGM Lion. And then we have this Star Wars-esque running description. that says 100 years before the story begins, it was a time of darkness in Transylvania, a time when Dr. Abraham Van Helsing and a small band of freedom fighters conspired to rid the world of vampires and monsters and to save mankind from the forces of eternal evil. ... They blew it. And then we pick up in the cemetery. There's some thunder and lightning going on outside, moving into the castle. Watching the movie back and listening to the commentary, the castle is actually a matte painting. So there's our Kustov reference for today.
Yeah, I know a great matte painter, and if anyone has, US 5 to 10 million, let us know. We can put you in touch with Mr. Sinha.
NP. We see a bunch of coffins inside the castle. It's kind of a dingy, wet room. The coffin cracks open. Did you pick up on the hand that comes out of the coffin?
No.
No, I never did either until watching it back. So there's a couple spiders that pop out, and then you see a hand start coming out of the coffin.
Interesting.
I never saw before.
I must admit, at the beginning, I was very focused on my frozen Tony's pizza.
Nice. Up in the ceiling, we hear the sound of bats, and a big bat which suddenly transforms, and Dracula drops from the ceiling. He stops and looks at a coffin, and then quickly exits. Next, we've got a group of guys that start approaching the castle. They've got pitchforks and fire. They throw some dynamite under the door and blow it to pieces. They enter. There's a vampire woman eating some type of carcass. I'm not sure exactly what it was. Van Helsing shoots her with a wooden stake, kills her right away, and then that's our first shot of seeing the amulet that's kind of glowing and flickering. What are your thoughts on just the amulet and just the look of it? And
yeah, it's definitely, as an adult watching it, it's a super cool scene to open up with, especially, after the Star Wars crawl, letting us know that they blow it. And we get into the scene, and we have a pretty classic monster movie setup of the villagers storming the castle with the pitchforks, and then we get to see the amulet. How do I say it?
Is it? Yeah, you know what? It is the amulet. My bad.
It had a special name, didn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll just call it the thing.
No, the amulet's good. I think I don't know why I wrote remulet.
I thought that's what it. Remulet. Yeah, I think you're confused. What happened is that part where the kid gets a phone call and he has to decipher the letters to have it spell Dracula. I think that's what just happened to you.
Yeah, for sure. So after we see that, they bring in a virgin, we assume, and she starts reading from the scroll. The floor starts to come apart. The dead literally start to rise from the ground. We see a bunch of skeletons. She finishes reading, and then the portal opens and sucks the girl and everybody else in. And then we pick up in present day 1987.
Just really go back to the scene where the portal opens up and sucks everybody in. And
amazing,
it's just
right?
Just seems so like the scariest thing ever. It just opens up, and all of the villagers are just kind of like, oh shit. And they just they get sucked up and sucked away.
Yep. So, opening scene in present day, Sean and Patrick are in the principal office. Sean explains they draw pictures in class because they have a monster club, which I thought was nice. I love how the principal tries to relate to the kids here, just saying, I understand monsters are cool, but you know what's cool? Science. And I'm just like, they're not buying it at all.
No, but as an adult, once you realize that monsters aren't real and science is real, science is a little bit cool. So, give little props to the principal. But he should have made a comment about the Stephen King rules shirts if you wanted to play with them a little bit. Nope, that sounds bad.
Well, Sean would disagree with you because he says we don't know that monsters aren't real, and then we run into the cat lady or the cat teacher in the hallway. I was just gonna say, let's talk about her hairdo for a second. Pretty sweet do, right?
It's gonna make a comeback, and people are gonna be wearing the cat face lady.
Yeah. Next, we have Fat Kid. He runs into a bully named EJ and another kid named Derek. They start picking on him. I wrote this down just because I thought it was hilarious. The one kid, Derek, grabs almost like a prop microphone and goes, "Hi, I'm Derek. I'm here in the streets with Fat Kid. He's blocking traffic. Fat Kid, can't you stop eating?"
Maybe you didn't realize this as you're skating over the fact that that's Wayne Arnold from Wonder Years.
Oh, no, I definitely have that in there.
Okay, good.
Next line, but yeah.
He's such a butthead of a bully in the Wonder Years, and here he is in the Monster Squad picking on a kid, and the best he can come up with is Fat Kid. And everyone calls the Fat Kid Fat Kid.
Yeah. Yeah, so, that was my next line. So he, after he kind of under his breath calls him an asshole, and then they step on his candy bar, and we have EJ and Derek saying some pretty awful things other than Fat Kid. They actually say faggot about 3 times. So let's talk about that.
There's 2 points that I want to bring up. One is I was always petrified after seeing this movie that somebody would take my candy bar, throw it on the ground, and step on it.
Right.
Like, I thought that was like a common thing that, like, what bullies would do, which is like, they just crush your candy bar because they can, and then they want you to eat it, you know? Like, terrifying. And then the language. I couldn't believe how just, vagrant? I couldn't believe just how flagrant they are with the way that they say things, and they just throw these words out to one another like it's no big deal. And nowadays, you can't even have, it'd be really funny if you just do like a bunch of bleeping censors.
I can't imagine, if this came out in 2017, there would be a massive protest over this movie.
Oh my gosh.
Without a doubt. So EJ tackles Fat Kid to the ground, starts wailing away on him, punching him, and then Rudy makes his grand entrance and skids into the scene. What's your first initial reaction to Rudy? I guess as a kid, what did you think of him? And then seeing him today?
I think I definitely had the same reaction both times, and it was kind of, what is this 18-year-old doing with these kids? He's so much older, and then, he's in middle school?
I think they're supposed to be about 11, and he's like 13 or 14. So he's a couple years older.
As an adult, so as a kid, I definitely thought that anybody older than you was just instantly awesomely cool.
Yes.
And would always be wearing leather jackets and smoking. And as an adult, it's kind of like, where the hell is his parents?
Now, the thing that I thought was really cool, and this is actually, I guess, what lands him the role as Rudy when he initially auditioned, is he asked Fred Decker and Shane Black for a cigarette so he could light one up, and they were just like, "We don't think we should give you one." He goes, "Well, it's in the script." But yeah, just where he strikes the match and lights the cigarette, I thought that's pretty cool.
It's the reason why I love a movie like this and why I love the podcast that we do is because we get to look back at a different time in the world where that was not thought of as, like, appalling.
Right.
This 13-year-old kid, as a character, it made perfect sense that he would just light up a cigarette and start smoking.
It's very 80s.
You couldn't have a 33-year-old smoking in a movie without people losing their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it's a clear reminder that the world used to be completely different. Even the bullying scene, like the language that they use, and then they tackle him to the ground and they beat the crap out of him. It's, like, look at the bully, Flash Thompson, in Spider-Man Homecoming. I mean, the best he came up with was Penis Parker, which was really funny. But, like, that's what his bullying consisted of.
So EJ gets off right away when he sees Rudy and kind of realizes he's in some deep shit. Because Rudy's apparently, the badass of the playground. And he goes, "I see you met my friend Horace, and he's going to make EJ pick up the Snicker bar and eat it in front of the entire school."
Again, part of the reason why I was so mortified by the thought of having to eat smashed candy is because then Rudy comes up and throws it in his face. Like, you're eating this. The school's there. Everybody's watching. It's just the most terrifying, embarrassing thing that could ever happen to a bully is he gets alpha bullied.
Yeah.
Joe Thompson.
I love that. Next, we have Sean and Patrick walking down the street with Phoebe the Phoebe. I can't not call her Phoebe the Phoebe.
Phoebe the Phoebe.
Sean says Wolfman has to wear pants so people don't see his wolf dork. I don't think when I was 5 I understood what wolf dork was, but this made me laugh pretty hard.
No, I definitely probably just thought it meant that Wolfman was a dork and only dorks didn't have pants on.
Right. Yep. So then they come across scary German guy's house. We see him kind of peek through the curtains at the end of it, but that's where we have Fat Kid come up, and he tells them they should let Rudy in the club. And they all agree if he passes the monster test. So, if you were doing this and you're running the Monster Squad, what do you have in a monster test? What's that consist of?
My monster test would definitely be, it would start by having to identify the first, the top 3 serious classes of monsters and being able to know any subclasses of said monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing their strengths and weaknesses. In my monster squad, you would have to know those things. You have to know how to kill the Wolfman. You have to know how to defeat the Mummy. I don't really think they do too much with the creature of the Black Lagoon. Although I love when he just sort of shows up.
He just lifts stuff out of the ground and then he disappears for most of the film.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what I think. I think they've got a pretty good Monster Squad test. I'd like to see it a little bit more official, maybe notarized, maybe some registered usage and some trademarks to go along with it. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, it's important to know your enemy.
Yeah. We're on a plane next. We've got a couple pilots having an argument. You hear them bicker back and forth, and then we hear a loud thud in the back, which they look at each other and say, I thought they were dead. And then the main pilot goes back to check on it. We see a bat fly by. I thought it's interesting that the bat flies by and he doesn't ever turn to see if it's coming back the other way. He just crouches down and stands up, and then we see Dracula standing right there, and he punches him directly in the mouth.
Such a good Dracula.
Yeah. Then he's going to pull the lever, thinking that Dracula is just going to drop out of the plane. He, of course, doesn't. He just floats. And the pilot just stares at him, and then he morphs into a bat and goes right down the chute. And then we have a pretty horrible-looking scene where they're over the shoulder of the pilot looking down, and just the graphics are so 1987. They're so out of date. But what did you think of that, just watching it back in our intro to Dracula?
Again, I love this Dracula. He looks the part. He plays the part.
Yeah.
He's menacing. He's smart. He's intelligent. He's not necessarily seductive, but keep in mind this is a child's movie. Children's movie. They're watching.
That's true.
The graphics, again, we know a matte painter. For anybody that's looking for some quality matte painting to try to...
And VFX.
Yeah, to eliminate 1987 graphics. But it's so much fun to watch. It's so limiting to the experience. It's not as bad as RoboCop claymation, but it's still funny to watch.
We're in the Monster Clubhouse next. I mean, just how awesome is this clubhouse? Just, I wish that I had one of those growing up. I'm deathly afraid of heights, but had it been 3 feet off the ground, I would have been good.
Never pictured you as being one afraid of heights.
Oh, deathly afraid of heights. I have panic attacks and start sweating from head to toe.
You want to come with me to the Eiffel Tower one day?
I do not.
Oh, well then. But the clubhouse, yeah, we had a neighbor that had a clubhouse that wasn't nearly as cool, but that was the base for our Monster Squad.
Yeah.
And it was maybe 5 to 10 feet in the air, nothing super. You would have been welcome to join us in there, Kyle.
I could have, 5 feet, I'd been good. Yeah.
But these guys...
And it's a real clubhouse, too. It's the interior shots, I'm sure they might have done on a soundstage, but that's a legit clubhouse that they had up in that tree.
Yeah, that's the real deal. And, obviously Phoebe the Phoebe is jealous.
Yeah, so inside the clubhouse, we have Rudy, who's watching a girl strip through the window. And he says he's starting to really like this club. And the guys are kind of testing him, and he's sort of not paying attention. He's giving some answers. Phoebe knocks on the clubhouse door. Sean opens it up. I thought it's hilarious that the door actually says no girls allowed. And his first response to her is he just goes, "Can't you read?"
And of course she can't, because she's a Phoebe.
That's true. And And then he tells her that she's not getting up here and just closes the door on her. And they say there's two ways to kill a werewolf. Silver bullet. Rudy gets that one right away. He can't think of the second one, and either can the guys, and I don't know of any either, even watching Silver Bullet back in the day. What's the second way to kill a werewolf?
Kick him in the nards.
There you go. So they get called in to dinner. Sean gets into the house. We see Mrs. Crenshaw. She's bought him a book from a garage sale, and it's by Van Helsing, but it's all in German, which we later find out that the book is exactly... or we find out how important the book is to the plot. And it's got some foreshadowing there, which I like. What did you think of just, the beginning to the book and understanding the German? And that's going to play a big role here in about 30 minutes.
It's such a cool little plot device that they just sort of swing in there. Everything just gets summed up so nicely. Oh, we found this book for you. You like monsters, here you go. It's Van Helsing's diary.
Yeah.
That thing is worth millions.
Yeah. And I don't think she actually says it's his diary, but we figure that out later on. But just the fact that his mom knew to get him a monster book in German and that he'd love it anyway, I thought was really nice.
Yeah, and he cherishes it, and thankfully the Monster Squad gets possession of this book, and thankfully there happens to be somebody in the neighborhood who is German.
Next we have Dracula. It's lightning outside, and he says, "Let it begin." Is it me, or does every time we see Dracula outside there's lightning? Was there something behind that from a writing standpoint, or in previous Draculas with lightning?
In terms of the Dracula mythology, like, the lightning makes sense because it, is foreshadowing the ominous doom that he brings.
Yeah.
But I can't say that if that plays a huge part in, the book or in other iterations of Dracula, other than it's a complete gothic theme. So, to have that lightning, the lightning definitely with Frankenstein and his monster plays a huge factor with Igor. And it's always been just like that ominous foreshadowing of the monster. And, it probably does play a part, like any time a Bela Lugosi would come through a darkened castle hallway. And
Back at the house, Sean wants to go see a drive-in movie, and he wants to go see Groundhog Day Part 12, which made me laugh. When's the last time you went to a drive-in movie? Those are a dying breed.
Within the last 3 years. So it's definitely been a recent memory for me. It's nowhere near as fun as when you were a kid, but partly that's because cars are so damn luxurious now.
Yeah.
That you're just sort of in this chamber of air conditioning.
Yeah, and plus they used to show better drive-in type movies. Like, if I'm going to go to a drive-in, I want to watch an action movie and I want to see a horror movie.
Right.
I don't want to go see Nut Job Part 2 followed by Monsters, Inc. It's not interesting for me.
No, but, the drive-in theater is definitely a lost art. The one that we used to go to had a barbecue pit in the front.
Awesome.
Right? Yeah, so you'd go, you'd bring some burgers, and you'd grill out, before the first movie would start, and then you'd go to your car, and you'd have your insulated thermos filled with alcohol, and you would just get shit-faced and watch movies and act like an asshole out in the grass.
Did your drive-in have the Beep Beep song?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember.
Oh, man. We've got one back home. It's called the 49er. Shout out to the 49er, but they've got something called the Beep Beep song. Now, next we've got Sean's dad, Dell, or Officer Crenshaw, whatever we want to call him. He tells Sean he can't go to the movie because he has to watch his sister, that damn Phoebe, and the parents have to go to counseling. I love that just in the middle of this conversation with his 10-year-old son, he just lights up a cigarette right in his bedroom.
Yeah. Again, it's a different world.
Yeah.
We like to think that from the 1960s to the 70s to the 80s that we had grown a lot as a culture, but in a lot of ways, not much progress was made.
He gets a phone call right after that. In the background, you hear a man screaming and asking to be locked up and says he's a werewolf. And then in the next scene, Crenshaw's leaving the house. He tells his wife they're going to have to reschedule and that he loves her. And she tells him to prove it. And he leaves anyway. So just from a writing perspective, like, what do you think of the subplot of, the marriage is in trouble and how that kind of fits into the story?
We can definitely take like a lens and examine that, and we can write like a 10 to 20 page dissertation about how the marriage falling apart is representative to the monsters in a relationship and how that overcomes from the darkness and how it conquers over the good of humanity, and that in order to properly maintain a relationship, you have to have this amulet of love. You have to prove the love through, the virgin sacrifice.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a mirror that you can make between the two subplots and then the grander plot.
That's good.
Do I necessarily think that was intentional? Knowing that it's Shane Black and then the very skilled Fred Decker, it's entirely possible. But at the same time, as an adult, it gives it an extra layer of comedy in some sense because of, prove your love, okay, goodbye. It just isn't going to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that definitely mirrors like the principle, monsters aren't real, science is. So we've got this juxtaposition between what you believe, what you don't believe, what you need to have proved. Seeing is believing. Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. The monsters are real. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
There's a lot of fantastic elements that I think this divorce subplot brings up.
Mm-hmm. Back in the jail, the guy claiming to be a werewolf struggles free, grabs a gun, fires it into the ceiling, and yells, "Lock me up." And then a cop shoots him a couple times, and then we go into another scene where they're basically interrogating a guard. It's an older gentleman. And they're trying to figure out how a 2,000-year-old mummy just got up and walked away. Which, of course, in the very next scene, he's walking away.
Oh my God! They say something to the guard, or the guard says something. It's hilarious. And
when he goes, can you hear all right? He's like, and he said yes. He goes, "Can you hear me now?" And he screams at it, and the guard just sits there and is just like, "Yeah, what do you want me to say?"
And then I'm so happy that they include the mummy, and the mummy's such a, Kevin Malone from The Office doesn't believe that mummies are even real.
That's true.
And then he gets so scared when he finds out that they are, because they are very scary monsters. But I like the portrayal of the mummy in this, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later when he has his gruesome car scene, which always another one that frightened the hell out of me as a kid.
Yeah. We'll definitely get into that. And then, of course, right after they say they don't just get up and walk away, the next scene is the mummy walking away from the museum. And then we go inside an ambulance, and the guy that they believe to be dead now from the jail cell, his body starts to move and twitch, and some sharp toenails shoot up out of his shoes, which look really cool. And next thing you know, the werewolf pops up from the back seat. I assume he kills the driver and crashes the ambulance, but I don't think we actually see that. But what did you think? First impressions of the werewolf and just the look of him and kind of how he morphs into that character.
The morphing part is so cool, and I think that the way that they handle morphing him from this guy into the Wolfman, and then even the costume and the prosthetics, he looks a lot better in 1987 than lots of future werewolf movies,
a lot of 100% agree.
Movies, they look so bad, but this one is pretty good. It's a pretty realistic portrayal. I mean, it captures the athleticism of the wolf with the morphed body of the human.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's definitely a scary and a solid portrayal.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm not real surprised. I mean, if you look at Stan Winston's resume, he did all the special makeup for Terminator 2, Batman Returns, Interview with a Vampire, And he's done some more stuff on the special effects side now that they don't do a lot of makeup these days. It's more CGI, which is what the charm of this movie is to me, is these guys are real characters. They're not computers. Cool. So the next scene, we have Sean sitting on the roof of the house. He has a pair of binoculars and a transistor radio. He's watching the drive-in movie. I'd like to point out that, once again, we have lightning outside, which seems to occur in every scene of this movie. And Sean is literally sitting there with a transistor radio with a giant antenna in the middle of a thunderstorm. How safe is that?
I think that this part of the movie is sort of like, for our generation, our childhoods, like, it's the wet dream for everything that you could possibly want to do on a night. It's thundering, it's lightning, you've got your transistor radio, you're on the roof, and you're watching the big screen of the drive-in across the way.
I can't even... If I had a drive-in movie right now outside my house, I would do that literally every night.
Absolutely.
The entire summer. Are you seriously watching Batman Returns for the 20th time? Yes, I am.
Well, or Groundhog Day 12.
Groundhog, yeah, of course.
Well, I'm
they'd be
really
on, like,
curious.
Groundhog's Day, like, 95 by now.
Well, I'm really curious, too. I can only assume that it's the Bill Murray version, and then things get really rotten by part 12. And so the movies are just him just, like, psychotically murdering people, because guess what? It doesn't matter in the morning.
If you thought he didn't like Ghostbusters 2, what do you think he thought of Groundhog's Day 12?
I think that's how Harold Ramis died. Feel free to censor me.
Yee. So at that point, Sean's dad walks through one of the windows. He brings him a burger, and basically, that's the end of that scene. Now, Officer Shaw is on the radio comm. He says that's 2 missing bodies tonight. He's referring to the mummy and the dead body in the back of the ambulance. This is a quick scene, but I think it starts to kind of put together the puzzle that there's several different monsters going on, and the police are starting to recognize that at this point.
I think you make a good point, and I think that, up to this point, the Monster Squad has been the gang of kids.
Right.
But at the same time, the Monster Squad is the squad of monsters that are on the loose.
Yeah.
Also, the Monster Squad is the divorce that's happening between the parents, because it's 2 monsters in a relationship that, isn't working out.
We got a lot of monsters going on.
There are a lot of monsters going on. It's like Monsters Inc. meets Monsters Balls.
We have a shot of the werewolf. He's walking through the woods. There's a lot of fog here. It's a pretty creepy scene. He comes up on Dracula. Also, the mummy standing right there. I mean, to me, it seems like Dracula seems to have some power over these monsters. Do you have any reason why he would have the power? I don't know that that's actually ever explained, or...
Well, one of Dracula's powers early on in cinema and literature is his seductive abilities, where he's able to just sort of like...
Yeah.
And, get people to... He's almost like the Pied Piper of people.
Hold on, how did that go one more time? Okay.
It's like Looney Tunes eyes.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting way, because being that Dracula's he's the center character, but it's not about him in Transylvania or it's not his battle against Van Helsing or anything like that. So, he has to have his seductive ability, and so it makes sense that he's able to spill that out against the monsters, which I think is a really cool way of sort of putting them in a trance under his power, while giving him so many of the powers that he does have.
Yeah. So and this is just continuing in that same scene, they all kind of walk over to the swamp, and Dracula points his cane. I don't know what else to call it other than it's a cane. The water starts to bubble. The coffin that had dropped out of the plane from earlier starts to rise out of the water. And we have the creature of the lagoon, or Gill-Man, whatever they want to call him.
Is he credited as Gill-Man?
I believe that's his credit name.
Oh, gosh.
And then he lifts up the coffin over his head and throws it onto the ground. And Dracula takes the lid off. We have our first shot of Frankenstein. He hooks up like some jumper cables to his ears, and Frankenstein starts to talk, and he just says, "Wake up, old friend, it's our time." And he starts to come to life. I mean, I have no idea what he says, but I mean, what do you think Frankenstein looks like as far as the character, and what
Oh, gosh. I can only assume he's had too much to drink if he's mumbling upon waking up.
Right.
And if Dr. Frankenstein wants to put his monster under, he need only to give him some of that Transylvanian juice. But I think that I like the Frankenstein overall. I have to say, in the Batman poster that you created, when you put my face on the Joker, I kind of think I look like Frankenstein in that picture.
Yeah.
So I definitely defer to this Frankenstein and look over what I think you Frankenstein to me as. But Frankenstein's such a unique monster in the many ways that he's portrayed. But I think here they go for a very classical look, and I think it pays off.
So next, and we'll kind of skip past a little bit of this. There's not a lot going on. Phoebe's laying in bed. Her mom is talking with her a little bit, and she just says, "Are you going to yell at him?" Thinking that she's referring to Dad. She says, "No, I love your dad." She goes, "No, I'm talking about Sean. You're going to yell at him for scaring me." And then, of course, in the next scene, it's the parents in a screaming argument. So where this takes us, though, is Sean watches through the blinds, and then he walks into the kitchen area and he sees the noteboard that says, "Mr. Alucard is interested in Van Helsing diary," and it just has $signs. So, couple things here. One, Sean immediately deciphers this onto a piece of paper, like some genius. And just from a writing standpoint, what did you think of this scene? And, with Sean, figuring it out within seconds, how smart is this kid for a 10, 11-year-old?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, this movie gave me a healthy skepticism for everything. So after seeing this movie, I can't see somebody's last name without thinking it's a bananagram. Zing. And I'm always, thinking, for this kid to see that on the board and to immediately be paranoid, I think is really telling of his character. I would kind of like to see a Monster Squad movie 30 years later with where the kids are now in life. Maybe they're ghost hunters. Maybe they are now the creepy German guy. But from a writing standpoint, it's a cool way of really working on the deception that is Dracula, to think that he would have called looking for Van Helsing's notebook $signs.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a clever way of sort of stacking the odds against the kids.
Mm-hmm. Now, the next scene, this one always cracked me up. We have Eugene. He knocks on his dad's door and says he sees a monster in his room. And the dad comes in and playfully busts open the door, and he starts yelling, "Monsters, everybody out!" And then, "Hey, see any more?" And Eugene points at the closet. The dad goes over, opens the door, but actually doesn't look in. And we, of course, see the mummy just standing there.
Okay.
And
how the fuck did the mommy get in there?
So that was going to be my next thing. Yeah.
How did he get in there? What is he doing? Is he looking for clothes?
I have no idea.
I want to know.
I would love to know how he made it in there, and then when the dad leaves, the next shot is of him going through the window. So he managed to open up the door after it was shut on him again and sneak out of the window without making a peep.
Well, he doesn't have lungs.
That's a really good point. But how nimble is he, though? Because anytime you see him walk, he's dragging himself and...
I think you bring up a great question, at least logistically, about the mummy. And, we talked a little bit earlier about the mummy as a monster. We talked about Kevin Malone's healthy fare of mummies.
Right.
And I don't mean to dismiss the fact of how funny the scene is with the dad when he comes in. He's like, "Monsters!" And he's just he's only looking to get back into bed to bone his wife and make a little sister. But realistically, we learn later, what's under the wrappings of the mummy, and there's nothing under there.
Nothing, yeah. Dust.
So to think what kind of noise he would make, it's just the wrappings, he would probably make very little noise.
It's interesting. I'd like to point out, just since we didn't talk about him in casting, Eugene is played by Michael Faustino, little brother to Bud Bundy.
Yes, I made the comment earlier how there was two big casting in this movie.
Yeah.
One being Wayne Arnold, the other being Bud Bundy's little brother. We have not yet talked about that.
I would love to just cover every season of Married with Children at some point. That's my favorite show. When we get hard up for material, we'll think about it. Next, we have Sean, and he's written on the chalkboard, Monster Squad. And the guys kind of want to know what it means. Sean explains, we're the Monster Squad. And Sean thinks there's real monsters because he overheard his dad talking about a man at the jail saying he was a werewolf. Also, Fat Kid farted.
I love that they keep calling him Fat Kid.
Oh man, Fat Kid farted. Sean's also figured out that diary is going to be an important piece. He did the cipher, found that it said Dracula. Just going back to like 1992 when I start watching this movie, I'm just thinking about how badly I wanted to be part of the Monster Squad and how cool that would have been to be up in that treehouse.
I think you would have been a good member of the Monster Squad.
Yeah.
I don't think you would have been Fat Kid. I don't mean that at all, but I think that you would have been a good bruiser. You know,
yeah.
You would have been the one to get in there and be throwing and shooting the arrows, and you would have been a good one.
I appreciate that. The next scene we have Dracula goes to visit Frankenstein. He has him locked away in a cell with rats all over the place. He tells Frankenstein that Van Helsing's diary is missing. He wants him to find it. He also mentions that children possess it, and if they do not cooperate, he wants Frankenstein to kill them. Did you find it weird that Dracula seems to keep everybody in a cell, including the vampire girls later on?
Hold on a second. I don't think I really noticed that. And the vampire girls have names, I believe. I think that it's such an interesting juxtaposition that you have Dracula on the outside of the cell, and then you have Frankenstein inside the cell, and Dracula is keeping these monsters caged.
Yeah.
So he knows their power. He knows what they're capable of. And it's sort of back to the marriage metaphor. It's like you got the two people and they're caged in this relationship and they want to get out of it. They're unable to get out of it. And the only thing that can do it is sort of the Prince of Darkness here, Dracula.
Much like Frankenstein and Dracula.
Going to let him out to kill the kids.
Now, he doesn't seem to be caging the mummy or werewolf who just run amok and go in and out of houses and in and out of jails and... Now, the next scene, we've got our first scary German guy sighting. What did you think of scary German guy in the whole scene where he meets Sean, Patrick, and Horace on the street? And by Horace, I mean Fat Kid.
I'm trying to remember what happens when he meets him on the street.
So they're kind of like huddled around. They're thinking about approaching him, about trying to read the diary. And
That's
before
right.
they can muster up the courage to go up there, he kind of cuts them off mid-sentence and pops into the scene.
It was definitely a creepy setup because, they're outside his house, they're creeping on him, and then creepy German guy creeps up on them. So it's like the creep of a creep.
Yes.
Night of the creeps. Well, day of the creeps.
In the next shot, we've got Phoebe the Phoebe. She's down by the clubhouse. She's going to meet up with Frankenstein for the first time. I didn't know what to really think of this because he's just been told to go kill the children. And within minutes, he's staring at this young girl all by herself in the middle of an open, basically an open field with a clubhouse. Did you assume just that something bad would happen to her at this point? Because all we see is his feet.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, this is a scene that's reminiscent to the book, where Frankenstein's monster does kill a young girl. In the river or pond or lake or whatever it is. So, from that standpoint, it's really kind of a cool setup that you see this young girl, and if you're familiar with what Dr. Frankenstein's monster is capable of, you kind of think he's going to accidentally kill her or purposely kill her because that's what he's been told to do. Mm-hmm. So you see his feet, you know who's coming, and you have this sort of dread about what's going on, and then Phoebe the Phoebe.
And then we're not sure if she's going to die, and next thing we know, scary German guy is wielding a giant butcher knife, saying, "Last chance for pie." Of course, Fat Kid takes the last slice, which, so real quick, who's the better Fat Kid? Fat Kid or Chunk?
Well, that's kind of an unfair question. I think most people are going to vote for Chunk by default. You know what? I like Monster Squad better than the Goonies.
Okay.
Shoot me.
Nope.
The silver bullet.
I think, well, Chunk is, but I'm going to vote Chunk just to go opposite of you.
Well, I wouldn't expect anything less from you.
Yep. Now, after he slices him a piece of pie, he starts to read the book, and I've got the quote written down. So, once every 100 years at the stroke of midnight, the amulet turns on, and at that moment it can be shattered. The balance between good and evil will shift, and evil will rule. There is a way to stop the forces of darkness. If one can retain the amulet before the forces of evil, there is another option, a ceremony. When followed to the letter, a vortex will swallow the forces of evil forever. This is the last entry by Van Helsing, and it was exactly 100 years ago from tomorrow night at midnight. What do you think of the writing? And what do you think of this new plot, where we find out it's a day from tomorrow?
It's definitely very convenient. Everything is sort of tying up very nicely for the Monster Squad on both ends.
Yes.
And I like the idea that it's these two polar opposite forces. They're both monster squads. They're both on this train ride heading towards Explosionville.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank goodness there happens to be a creepy German guy in the neighborhood that he can translate and tell. And thankfully Van Helsing wrote down in perfectly clear exactly what needs to be done, when, where, how, and why.
Very
Van Helsing
convenient.
is looking out for his bros.
Exactly. So they leave the house. Scary German guy stops them and explains to him he's not a monster. Now, one thing I noticed here, I don't know if you picked up on this, but when he goes to shut the door, they zoom in and you can see he has a tattoo on his wrist.
Oh, boy.
When he shuts the door. Did you ever see that?
I remember noticing it as a kid and not really knowing anything or putting two and two together. It's very similar to the scenes in the X-Men movies where Magneto flashes off his tattoo and he says he's been tattooed once. But as an adult, that's powerful as hell. He knows about monsters.
So I'm gonna blow your mind here. Yeah, I think the only one that can answer this is probably Fred Decker or Shane Black. I don't know if this has ever been talked about, but I think that the tattoo is from him being in a concentration camp when he was when he was a young kid. I think he's been marked, and he's not actually German. He's Jewish, but he speaks German. Isn't
that obvious as an adult?
I didn't know that it was obvious. I thought I came up with this awesome idea.
You thought you came? Well, that's what I was saying. The reference from the X-Men movie when Magneto, when they're like, "Oh, you don't have the mutant mark," and he's like, "I've already been marked once," and he shows the tattoo because he was in Auschwitz.
Well, way to crap on my profound finding here.
Well, you know what, Kyle? I am sorry.
All right. So,
but I didn't know it as a kid, so I'm as an educated adult as gleeful as you are.
So do we change his name to Scary Jewish Guy then?
Or Frightened Jewish Guy, because...
Yeah.
Or Wholesome. Let's just call him Wholesome Bob.
So the boys are walking down the street. They start to lay out the game plan. It's so easy. They just need a virgin. She needs to read the spell, and whammo, they blow them all to limbo. Piece of cake, right?
So we would hope.
Yep. Next scene, we have Sean approaching Rudy at the diner. He asks Rudy, "Do you know any virgins?" Rudy spits his drink all over the table.
Oh, gosh.
Rudy, this has gotten a laugh from me.
Rudy?
That always gets a laugh out of me, him spitting out the drink. The squad walks into the clubhouse. Phoebe comes running from the backyard to get their attention. They ignore her at first, and then she bites Sean on the hand. "Would you look?" And we see Frankenstein. And basically they scramble and go hide in garbage cans and behind bushes. And
that kid jumps in the garbage can. I'm always like, how does he fit?
And probably the best Phoebe line of the movie, she calls them all chicken shit.
Chicken shit, which obviously would not happen today.
Right. And I just thought she's hilarious here. And then she also says, "Now can I be in the Monster Club?" So right after that, we just go right into the clubhouse. Phoebe has taught Frankenstein how to talk. He also takes a photo of the neighbor taking off her clothes like Rudy. And starts yelling, bogus, but bogus, bogus. The Flash scares him. Rudy then hands him a Frankenstein mask, which he breaks and holds to his face and starts yelling, scary. What did you think of him being scared of his own mask?
I definitely thought it was a cool sort of way to introduce the nostalgia of those characters, of those Universal monsters, into the movie. That, Frankenstein is a well-known entity, Frankenstein's monster, and he's scary as F, as the kids say. And to think that, a lot of times monsters don't know that they're monsters, and I think that creates a parallel with Scary German Guy, or what would we call him, Pleasant Bob?
Yeah, that'll work.
Pleasant Bob. A lot of German soldiers have gone on to say, they didn't know that they were the bad guys. Mm-hmm. They didn't know what the monsters looked like in World War II, and so I think that it creates a really, really, really cool set piece of, you have a monster that doesn't know what he looks like, but he's scared at what he does look like, and therefore realizes that he is a monster.
I think just from a writing standpoint, if you're trying to get the audience to now change their mindset of this guy is scary to he is now part of the group, he's a protagonist, so to speak, they do a good job there. Because the next scene is him walking down the street holding their hands. So he's no longer scary to me at this point. I just feel like he's like their backup now, which is cool. Cause
he's the muscle. He's the Kyle Autry of the group.
Maybe Joe Thompson. I don't know if I can go that far.
Explosive living with Frankenstein's monster.
Next, we have Dracula and Wolfman. They are searching for the amulet, and they are just so close to finding it, Dracula says, and then he puts his ear against the wall right away, and there it is. One crack, and you can see it in the back of the wall. So, again, everything seems to be very convenient in this movie, which is why I think it's 82 minutes with credits. But yeah, I mean, just what did you think of them finding this, and kind of our first look at the amulet?
It's the kind of thing that as an adult, as you're looking at, it's hard to watch a movie and not look for plot holes and not look for those conveniences, and to say like, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? But I mean, you have to remember this is a kid's horror comedy adventure.
Yep.
And let Dracula find it. Let him have it. Mm-hmm. He's going to get his comeuppance.
In the next scene, we have Eugene writing a note to the army. It says, "Army guys, come quick. There are monsters. Eugene." I don't know what kind of post-service they have in 1987, but how in the heck does he expect this to make to the army guys in less than 24 hours?
Well, what difference is it then when he does in December when he sends a letter to Santa Claus? Santa Claus, give me Atari, Eugene.
Next, we have Lieutenant Shaw telling Crenshaw that last night at the crash, they saw a black hearse, and on the front of it, there was a skull. And in the very next scene, Werewolf is actually back in the phone booth, and he's calling Crenshaw. He answers. He tells him to come quick to 666 Shadowbrook Road. He's found the amulet. Crenshaw doesn't think this is serious. He tells the guy to have a good night. And then he gets told, "Don't hang up. I'm the one you shot last night. I'm the werewolf." And then he starts morphing in and goes, "I'll kill your son." And then he breaks out of there. And I just thought this is a really cool scene because you see him change into the werewolf again and then just destroy the entire phone booth, which if you're a kid and you're 15 years old, that's where we used to go to make calls when you didn't have a cell phone. Pop in a quarter and dial a number.
I think that, I've made this point before, and I think I've made it to you before, is what do modern generations think of Bill and Ted? Do they watch that movie, and are they like, what the fuck is this box that they're in?
They have to, I assume they probably Google it and figure it out, but initially it has to be like, what are they doing?
I mean, can you remake Bill and Ted? Would they just get sucked into a cell phone? Like, is there any excitement?
Right. Zero excitement.
Just self-defeating. So it's such a... Having that it's the phone booth is such a...
Which, aren't they making a sequel to that? I believe it's in development, isn't it? That would be interesting to see what the heck they do with that, unless they just set it in, like, the 90s.
I hope they do that. That would be ideal.
That would make sense.
And they do something where from the past goes to the future, and then they just use the current actors.
So they go back in time.
Set it up in the past.
They're going to go back in time. And you can go back in time, too, by visiting us on Twitter and Instagram at Back in Time Pod, or subscribe to us on iTunes. Next, we've got Sean, Eugene, Fat Kid, and Frankenstein as they arrive at Shadowbrook Road. Eugene drops a Twinkie in the water. He reaches to grab it before Gill-Man pops out of the water and steals it. Do you think Gill-Man's trying to kill Eugene here, or is he just really hungry for a Twinkie?
Well, that's a really good question because, what does a Gill-Man eat? Does he eat fish? And if he eats fish, is he going to like a Twinkie? I don't know.
As Winston would say, that's a big-ass Twinkie.
Nicely done. Nice tie-in.
In the clubhouse, we've got Patrick and Rudy. They are talking to what we now know is Patrick's sister, which is the hot girl from across the clubhouse that keeps stripping with her window wide open, conveniently.
She likes the attention. It's like in Little Nicky at the beginning scene with John Lovitz.
Nice.
Just a big bed.
You just couldn't wait to talk about Little Nicky, could you?
Well, I know Little Nicky's a little out of our 80s and 90s scope, but it's just a big bed.
So it's kind of funny here because Patrick's doing the classic, like, coughing as he's trying to ask her a question. Are you a virgin? Have you ever been dork? So she's trying to get him to kind of come out with it. So Rudy steps in with a big old grin on his face and asks her if she's ever been dorked.
Again, bringing the dork back into full circle.
I'm going to start using that. That's making a comeback. Hashtag dorked.
Hashtag dork. Hashtag Wolfman's dork. Hashtag have you been dorked.
Yee. We won't talk about that. It's a bad story. She gets mad and acts like she's about ready to get up, and then Rudy whips out the naked photo of her to blackmail her to go along, which is perfect timing. Next, we have Sean telling Fat Kid to quit being a wuss. I love that Sean's now calling Frankenstein Frank. Did you pick up on that?
I did not. He calls him Greg?
No, he calls him Frank.
Oh, I thought you said Greg. I was like, nope, I most certainly did not pick up on Greg. Frank makes a lot more sense. Greg makes no sense.
No, I just love that a 10-year-old's just like, Frank, let's go. And they just shorten it.
You yelled at me when I called Fred Decker Freddy Boy.
That's true. That's true. You're not Frankenstein.
Also, I'm not 10 years old.
That's true. Frank says, Master is near. Master wants children dead. Sean,
Master's coming.
Now here's a blast from the past. Sean presses on towards the house.
Press on.
Fat Kid isn't sure he wants to go, but eventually joins them. We've got Dracula down in the basement rigging up some dynamite. The boys in Frankenstein enter the house. Sean says, we have two things on our side. Frankenstein and my dad's a cop. So if anyone messes with us, they're going to get their butt kicked. Frank steps into the house. We hear a creak on the floor. Dracula looks up from in the basement and then blows it. And we see Frankenstein get pummeled with wood and he falls into the ground. And at this point, the boys think that Frankenstein might be dead.
Well, that's mildly unfair because by definition, he's already dead.
That's a good point. Now, this to me, I think, is like the pivotal moment in the Sean character where he really kind of takes control here. So I got a couple things written down. But I think this is like his shining moment where he says if he's dead, he died trying to help us. Now look, I'm the leader of this squad. And Dracula knows we're here, so let's find the amulet and get the hell out of here. And then of course Wolfman jumps in and Fat Kid, we have the best line of the movie. He says, kick him in the nards. He doesn't have nards. And of course, we find out he does have nards.
Wolfman has nards. I think that's such an underappreciated fighting technique. Kids, if you're ever in a fight with a big bully or a wolfman, kick him in the nards and run.
Yeah.
There's no shame in that. I mean, Wolfman has nails, he has fangs, he has ears, and he has nards.
Tell you this, when I was in second grade, I beat up a bully and I kicked him square in the nards.
Attaboy.
One shot, and then I took off running from recess. Went right inside.
Right to math class.
Yep. That's how you do it.
2 + 2 = nards.
So they try to escape here, but everywhere they turn, they're being blocked off. The monsters, vampire girls are back. They come across this statue, and Sean says something like, usually with one of these things, there's some type of lever. And he just starts feeling around, pulls it, and they drop right through the floor.
How many freaking hallways are there in that scene? They turn to the left and there's somebody.
Dracula,
they turn to the right, there's somebody.
Wolfman,
they turn around,
Mummy.
there's somebody. They turn like 18 times and there's somebody in every direction that they're coming. Yep. And then they find the statue. And I do like the way that they make it a little bit meta where they're like, oh, the statue is always the way to get out of here.
Yeah, it's kind of like Scream where they say you should never run upstairs. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be there. So Patrick tries to walkie-talkie Sean. He can't get through to him. Then we go back into the house, and they all sit up from falling through the floor. And Sean sees the amulet. I keep switching it. Amulet. Gosh dang it. Anyway, he goes into the now blown up room that Dracula exploded with the dynamite. He comes out with the amulet in his hand, and Dracula grabs him right away. And Fat Kid, of course, has a slice of pizza wrapped up in his pocket, conveniently. And he pulls it out, puts it on his face, and burns him. Garlic. So, first off, why wouldn't he have a pizza in his pocket? That's like the Fat Kid in Little Giants, where he's got the Cheetos and the jelly sandwich in his helmet.
Of course. You can't even chew gum in a helmet, and this guy's got a deli sandwich in his helmet.
Or, we've got, if we want to go back to the Goonies, we've got Chunk in his, what's he have, a payday or something with Sloth in the room?
Well, I wanted to have a payday earlier tonight, but I didn't.
Yeah, I haven't had a payday in years. That's an underrated candy bar, huh?
It's definitely underrated. Hashtag payday.
Hashtag
every week.
Fat kids talking about food. Moving on.
Kids talking about food. But no, I love the fact that one fat kid has a piece of pizza.
Yeah.
2, it's a piece of triangle pizza. It's not a square. It's not an end piece. It's a triangle.
Yeah.
And it's garlic. Who eats garlic at that age?
Well, there's garlic in the crust, so I assume that it's just not like a garlic pizza, but you can just... It's got to be heavy garlic, though, because it burns the shit out.
It leaves a scar.
Yeah.
Dracula is not happy. The leader of that monster squad is not happy.
Fat Kid's got to have some terrible breath. Let's move on. The boys escape through the woods. Scary German guy to the rescue. He shows up with his Jeep. The rest of the squad shows up as well on their bikes. Scary German guy says, perhaps we should all go back to my place for some pie. In the middle. They pretty
national anthem.
We'll get back to that in a second. They pretty much all ignore what he says. Sean pulls out the amulet, says everything is true. I want to get too much off topic here, but can we talk about Scary German guy and trying to get all these young kids back to his house for pie? Wildly inappropriate.
It would not fly. Just let's go to my house for pie. I think the first round of pie, and I think you made the comment about you compared him to the witch from Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. He's a bit of a creep, but he doesn't ever cross the line, so we'll let him slide. Maybe in the sequel, we'll see. Next, we've got Shaw and Crenshaw. Sean is kind of busting his balls over the phone call not being true. But he jumps into the car anyway, and they start driving. So a little bit of foreshadowing here because they're going to run into somebody pretty quickly here.
Well, or run through somebody.
Sean says it's 20 minutes to midnight. So when he said that, I actually happened to pause the movie and just see, kind of like with Batman, if you remember last week, when he says, he calls for the helicopter and says, 15 minutes, and the movie plays out in real time. Monster Squad pretty much does the same thing here. So he says 20 minutes to midnight at about the 60-minute mark, and the movie's over at 80 minutes. So this one plays pretty true to that time frame as well. Now, if he says, if we're going to pull this off, and this is such a great line. So the mummy apparently has left the castle somehow, because remember, he's in one of the doorways trying to cut them off. And he's now standing in the street and jumps onto the Jeep and attaches itself. So first off, how athletic is this damn mummy? And second of all, how did he make it all the way from the castle to a cutoff point for a speeding Jeep?
Well, I think, it goes to show just how underrated the mummy is.
Yeah.
And how, like you're saying, how athletic he is. If he's some Egyptian prince, some, capable entity of being able to dive and catch it. But I think you're focusing on the wrong things, because what happens next is horrifying. I hate this part. This part ruined me, ruined Jeeps for me, ruined bows and arrows, ruined rapping. It's everything about what happens here next is just...
Well, keep going. What happens?
Frickin' Rudy shoots a arrow and catches Mummy's loose wrapping to a tree, pulls him tight, and unravels him.
And then drops another classic line from Rudy. See you later, Band-Aid breath.
Band-Aid breath.
Next thing, we've got Sean and Crenshaw. They're flying down a road, and a car starts approaching them right down the middle and drives right through them in thin air. Shaw, I should say, who was kind of busting Crenshaw's balls a couple seconds earlier, looks at him and just says, "I'm not going to say anything. Not a single word." So, it's kind of reminiscent of like the scene in Ghostbusters 2 where Winston and the train goes directly through him.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, and I was also going to say Ghost Dad.
Which, I don't know if I know that one.
Bill Cosby, he's a ghost dad.
God, if I've seen that, it's been way too long. I don't remember it at all.
Well, listeners, we're going to put that on the list, and we're going to blow Kyle's mind.
Oof, that's a rough one. Does he drop any pudding lines in there? Or just
we'll just wait to find out.
He had his way with some interns. We'll move on. Hold on. Okay, so in the next scene, Dracula shows up at the Crenshaw house. He busts through the picket fence. He pulls the door off his own car and goes right to the backyard, lights a stick of dynamite, throws it into the clubhouse, says, "Meeting adjourned," and turns around and it blows the entire clubhouse to smithereens.
Because that's what you do to your enemies. You blow up their clubhouse.
Well, they've pissed him off now. So, this is, I think, the movie starts to really kind of pick up the tempo and pace with this whole thing. Crenshaw and Shaw pull up to the house, and they're chasing the car that ran through them. He tells Dracula to freeze. He pulls out a stick of dynamite and lights it by just looking at it, which I thought was really awesome. And then he tosses the dynamite underneath the cop car where Shaw is inside calling for help, and he blows him up here. So that's the end of Shaw.
He's dead.
Yep. And Crenshaw stands in the front yard. He fires 4 shots at Dracula, who doesn't flinch, and says, "I will have your son," morphs into a bat and flies away. And then we have Mrs. Crenshaw runs out asking what's happening.
I think, to me, this scene is so epic to think that Dracula goes and he blows it up. He blows up, to him, this is his best case scenario is to blow up a lot of children. Then he blows up the cop car. And then he's so fixated on killing the children that I worry that he's sort of losing his eye on the prize. Like, he has a certain amount of time, and he knows that the boys are going to open the vortex. They've got the amulet. He needs to get his ass in gear.
Yep. So Mrs. Crenshaw runs out. She asks Dell what's happening. he kind of ignores her. He's in a little bit of shock because his best friend just got blown up, which I can imagine is scaring him to death. He runs into the house. He calls Sean on the walkie-talkie. He asks him where he's at. Sean answers and says, "We're almost here. Almost to town square. Hurry up." Now, interesting side note here. Watching the special features, there's some deleted scenes. So right before the treehouse blows up, they actually cut a scene from the movie where you see Mrs. Crenshaw, and she's taking luggage down to the door.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and she's getting ready to leave Mr. Crenshaw. So when you see him run into the house, you can actually see all the luggage right by the front door.
Huh.
Yep. And then after he calls Sean, they pan to like a shot of the treehouse being blown up. But if you look closely, there's a family photo and there's a big crack in it. Clever filmmaking. I wish they would have left that in. I don't see, an extra. It was like an 8-second scene. And it would have tied things together nicely. I wonder why they cut that.
Well, especially since we talked about earlier the parallel between, the breakdown of the marriage, the bully, the nerds, the monster squad, the other monster squad. I mean, there's a lot of parallels that tie all of those stories together that to me is worth the payoff.
Yeah. Yeah, I know just listening to special features, Fred Decker just said that it wasn't his idea. It was something that the studio heads, cut some stuff out of the movie to shorten it. They thought it should be under 80 minutes, but whoever's decision it was to cut that was just stupid.
Well,
they should have left that.
Their decision led to them making how little amount of money?
3.7 or 3.9 million, one of those two. Anyway,
2020, my friend.
Next, we pull up to the church. You gonna say something?
Yeah, that's a quote from the movie Dirty Work. We should add that to the list.
It's on the list.
Fuck yeah,
that's the Saigon horror that bit my nose off.
Computer high five.
Next, we pull up to the church, and Sean tells Rudy, "Don't kick a church, it's religious." And Rudy says, "It's locked, what it is." I thought that line cracked me up.
Rudy is a clever son of a bitch.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of one-liners coming up here. Next, we see the vampire woman approaching down the street, and they say, "Where you going, Rudy?" He says, "I'm in the goddamn club, aren't I?" And he starts to walk up to the vampires, shoots one immediately with a wooden stake, and then we see the bat start swooping in from the sky. Actually, I know earlier we kind of trashed him a little bit on the airplane scene with the graphics. The bat scene looks fantastic, swooping in, I thought.
I mean, I think overall the way that this movie is shot and the way that it's presented and the graphics that they do it holds up. Yeah. It's worth it.
Yeah, there's a couple things that they just can't help it because it's 1987, but like this scene in particular I thought was really cool. So anyway, the bat swoops in, it's coming right at Shaw. Crenshaw shows up just in the nick of time and crack shot. He hits the bat while driving and sends him right through the building, right through the glass. He's got to have a good shot to be able to hit him while moving.
Well, he's not a patrolman.
Good point. So what do we think of the vampire girls here? And just the bat flying in and just... I feel like this is where you start to see a lot of the momentum of the movie pick up. There's going to be a lot of quick cuts. The tempo is really, really quick now. But just before we jump into that, what do you think of that?
I definitely think that this is like the final set piece of the movie, that everything is building up to this. And I think a lot of it sort of mirrors a lot of other Dracula movies where you've got the, Slavic type of a set piece where you've got the church, you've got the town center, you've got the chicks, if I'm not mistaken, the brides of Dracula.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what they are. I don't know that I ever looked up their names, but that makes sense.
Sure, there's some sort of literary connection between that, and my literature counterparts will probably kick me in the nards, but...
Right in your wolf dork.
The point being, I think that it does what they did with the Frankenstein scene by the pond, and it does that for Dracula the same way they did the scene with the mummy at the museum, the same way they did with the creature of the Black Lagoon at the lagoon, and now we have Dracula's big set piece.
Yeah. So Crenshaw runs into the building. We see Dracula kind of like half morphed. I don't know how to describe his look here. He kind of looks like a naked Dracula, and he's just kind of spazzing out on the ground. Crenshaw lights the dynamite and gets ready to throw it on Dracula, but Wolfman comes in and starts throwing Crenshaw all over the place. Sean comes to the rescue, backing up old Daddy-O, and says, "Hey, asshole, you looked," and hits him with a pipe. And then Crenshaw stuffs the dynamite down his wolf dork and throws him out the window, and he explodes into a million pieces. So, what did you think of just the scene here? Sean coming to the rescue. I'm interested. I wonder what they used to blow him up, because that's a really cool shot where he flies out the window and you can see all the body parts and stuff.
Well, I think it's important to note that, we have father and son coming together and overcoming.
Yep.
We know the mother, as you previously stated, she's leaving. She's got her luggage. She's packed up. She's good to go. I mean, Daddy boy, he screwed up good. Mm-hmm. So she's gone. So now, in a post-Monster Squad world, you're left with dad and son, and they need to come together to sort of establish a bond. And they will always have this moment. And I definitely think it's cool that, dad steps up and he takes care of his boy. And he shoves the dynamite. I know you said in wolf dork. I don't remember it going up his pee hole.
He just stuffs it in his pants.
So, just not.
We'll leave that to your imagination.
It's like the Harrison Brewer vibrator effect.
Good Lord. So, you see,
it creates a cool. It creates a cool connection between father and son, and it sets the stage for. There's always somebody that you need to rely on, and I think that's the truth of the Monster Squad, and it gives us the second way that you can kill the Wolfman.
Blow him up.
Blow his ass up.
But he's not really dead. So the next scene, we see his body parts all over the ground. The camera focuses on his detached hands, and we see his fingers start to move. Next, we've got Scary German Guy. He's trying to get the Virgin to focus and make her read. She gets through it, but nothing actually happens. Wolfman, we go back to Wolfman again. His body parts start to form together, which I love this scene. You start to see stuff kind of like move, and all of a sudden it's just like poof, almost like Terminator 2.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. So I wonder if James Cameron was a Monster Squad fan.
Have to ask him and find out.
Yeah. Let's get him on the podcast, huh? So next we've got Wolfman stands up and howls and then runs out. And then we've got Rudy standing in the middle of the street, and we see Wolfman actually enter from the back alley. So the police officers come flying in. I think Rudy thinks he's in some trouble because he just stares at him. And then they start firing shots at the Wolfman, and he kind of moves out of the way. Back to Scary German Guy. He asks if she's really a virgin. And she says, well, no, Steve, but he doesn't count. And Patrick flips out, which I always love that. He doesn't count.
It's so perfect for the 1980s where, whatever. I'm not in high school right now, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But to think that, in 1987, I'm a virgin. Well, the guy that dorked me, he doesn't count.
So the police officers try and wrestle with Wolfman since the gunshots are doing nothing. Rudy loads a pistol with a silver bullet and says, bang, one shot, and it morphs him back into the man again. And he says thank you and lays down and dies. So we see the one way to kill a werewolf is the silver bullet. Also, Rudy's kind of a badass because grown men had no effect and he took care of business.
Gotta stick with the silver bullet. Well, you don't need two ways to kill a werewolf if you know at least one.
Yeah. So next we've got Gill-Man. He pops out of the sewer hole where Fat Kid was standing, and he kind of falls over. Eugene points to Phoebe here. This scene cracks me up. And asks Scary German Guy if she's a virgin. He says yes, and he will help her. So
Yeah, he will.
Fat kid grabs a rifle, backs up against the store window. Inside, we've got EJ again with the other guy. I forget his name already. Derek, I think.
Yeah.
He says, let me in, but they won't. He turns back to Gill-Man and shoots him with the rifle. EJ and Derek come back out and say, hey, fat kid, good job. And he says, my name is Horace. And he's officially come full circle, and we can no longer call him fat kid. He's now Horace.
He earned his Horace.
Absolutely. Scary German guy's helping Phoebe read. Dracula shows up. He, of course, is surrounded by lightning, as we know throughout the movie. He starts to defend himself, and police officers try and stop him, but he's just basically one-punching them and pushing them out of the way. They're clearly not going to do anything to him. He fires, I think, a lightning bolt at Scary German guy. Do you know what that is? It's like it was like white, and it lands on his chest and knocks him down.
Just a bolt of fire lightning. I think he got an upgrade at the last level that we didn't know. It was a secret hidden tunnel.
So he fires a lightning bolt at Scary German guy, and he lifts Phoebe up by her cheeks and says, give me the amulet, you bitch. And she screams, and Frankenstein comes in and grabs him by the back of the neck. Bogus! And throws him into a metal gate and goes right through his heart. And at that point, I think Dracula is pretty much dead. Or I assume he is, because he took a stake through the heart.
Yeah, I read one time a study that was talking about how to kill zombies.
Yeah.
And, the most renowned way to kill a zombie is to cut its head off.
Mm-hmm.
And then the study was like, well, yeah, that would kill anything and everything ever.
Mm-hmm.
So in the same regard, a stake to the heart kills Dracula, pretty much would kill anything and everyone ever.
Now, put yourself in the position of Phoebe. How scared would you be right here had you been lifted up by your cheeks and called a bitch by Dracula?
Thankfully, her and Frank were close, that I think she's got a little bit of resilience to her.
Yeah.
And, she's Phoebe the Phoebe.
Yeah.
She wants to be a part of the Monster Club.
Mm-hmm.
She's a pretty dynamic little bitch.
So according to her and Fred Decker on the special features, I listened to the commentary. This is a one-shot take. The actor that played Dracula was super nice to her at all times. So you actually see when he lifts her up, he has his normal teeth in. He's got blue eyes. And then when he delivers the line, he's got his fangs in and red eyes. So her scream is 100% legit. And she just starts crying immediately.
Poor Phoebe.
But whatever you got to do to get the shot, though, right?
And it worked. It's definitely a quality scare.
Yeah. Scary German guy finishes translating for Phoebe and throws the amulet, opening the portal. It starts sucking everything into the portal. Everybody tries to grab a hold of something. We see Sean and Crenshaw. They're laying on the ground holding onto a tree. And real quick, Dracula jumps on top of Sean and starts pulling him away towards the portal. So we're coming up to the ending here. So they're kind of wrestling back and forth. And Sean sees a wooden stake rolling alongside of him, grabs it, and stakes him right in the heart. And then we see Van Helsing come out of the portal, grab Dracula and drag him back, and then do this. And gives him a thumbs up.
18th century thumbs up.
I love that it's, he's from the 18th century, so he's it's almost like he's trying to be cool with the thumbs up. Like they really did that 100 years ago. I like that tie-in.
It's like the principle.
Yeah. There you go. Science is cool, man.
It's cool, man. Killing Dracula is cool, dog. Thumbs up to you.
So Sean saves the day again. Patrick pulls him to safety. We see Frankenstein crawl over the Phoebe. She tells him not to go and grabs a hold of his hand. We actually see Frankenstein floating here, so I guess we're supposed to believe Phoebe's holding him up. He's a 7-foot-tall brick shithouse, but she's holding on to him by her fingers. Gotta love some movie magic. Frank says goodbye and starts waving as he gets sucked into the portal and it closes.
Goodbye, Bird.
I love you.
Bird.
Wait, he doesn't say I love you. I added that. And then Scary German guy goes, let's go back to my house for some pie. No, that doesn't happen either. So now, coming full circle here, we see the Crenshaw family, and they are all reunited. They're hugging each other. Is the marriage saved? We don't know.
Well, I wish that there was a Monster Squad 2.
Yeah.
And 3, and all the way to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Because as the kids get older, they're only going to get stronger in their monster fighting abilities. You know, and unless Dad steps away from the Force and joins the Monster Squad, I don't have high hopes for the marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be tough. So, last scene of the movie, we see an army tank roll in. Eugene's note has made it to the army. And we have a general jump out and ask, "Who's Eugene?" And he said, "Okay, son, where are they? Where's the monsters? Can anybody tell me what the Sam hell is going on in here?" And then Sean steps up, says, "Well, sir, I can. Who are you?" And he hands him the business card. "We're the Monster Squad." And that's our movie. What did you think of the ending here? Let's wrap it up, put a bow on it.
I definitely am totally, as an adult, enjoying the comparison that gets to be made between the army coming to battle the monsters. As we know, scary German guy battled the Germans. Like, there's that creation between, alluding to World War II and the Army America coming in at the last second to battle the monsters. Like, it's such a cool little bow that you definitely don't pick up as a kid because you're so worried about Sean and his business card and the Monster Squad.
I love the ending, the music, and I'm going to probably put it at the end of this, and we'll try to exit out as we introed to it earlier. But all in all, it's been 30 years. It's been at least 6 or 7 since I watched it after I bought the DVD, and I just thought it's as good as I remember it. It's an awesome movie. It's fun. It's short and quick. And ultimately, the good guys win.
Absolutely.
So thanks for listening to episode 3 of the Back in Time podcast. We had a great time revisiting the Monster Squad. Next week, we will be jumping back to review the comedy film Heavyweights from 1995. Please remember to subscribe to us on iTunes. It's super easy to do, and we'll make sure that you never miss an episode. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/backintimepod, on Twitter and Instagram at backintimepod, and all episodes are available on YouTube. But for now, for JD and myself, we are out of time. It's time to jump back into the DeLorean, punch in August 24th, 2017, and return back to present day. Have a great week. Thanks for listening.